Welcome to Black and White, brought to you by XrepublicTV. I'm Mark DeWitt. Tonight's topic, Syria. It's been in the news a lot lately. We've got all these concerns about what's going on in Syria. In fact, the Department of Defense has been drafting plans to go in and find the areas where they keep the chemical weapons and have strikes. Now, this is all coming out at the same time that we've got the Russian ambassador to NATO complaining about the fact that weapons, specifically missiles, are being brought into the border at Syria and Turkey. And also there's some news that it's been going into Jordan as well. These are things that concern us, but when it gets right down to it, Syria is no threat to the United States. In fact, the news actually lists what the real threat is. They're afraid that the Syrian leadership is going to use weapons against the Syrian people. Now, this isn't something that's typically done by the Syrians. In fact, they've never done it. The last time chemical weapons were used, they were used by Saddam Hussein, and it was a selling point to get us into Iraq. A lot of the same rhetoric is being used to bring us into Syria at this point, and so we've got to keep an eye on it. Now, we've got some news from the peanut gallery, or the U.S. Senate. I call it the peanut gallery. We've got the number one nut job in the Senate. That's Senator John McCain. And he's quoted as saying, "We're on the precipice of the most horrendous act of our century." Now, he's referring to Syria and the potential for using chemical weapons against its own people, but I don't know that that would be the most horrendous act of this century. But what can you expect? This is the top nut job in the Senate, the peanut gallery. Now, if you really want to understand what's going on with Syria, it's really worthwhile to put it into context by understanding the PNAC document. Now, PNAC defines the terms on how we're going to go in and settle these areas. It goes back over a decade, and all the information that's in it is really relevant today because the actual plan is being perpetrated at this time, and you can observe it as it's going on. Now, foreign problems and all the different wars that we're waging around the world are not the only problem for us and our security. Our leadership has decided that we also have to take care of our security at home. So we have the new National Defense Authorization Act. Now, this act is something that we've talked about before, and one of the things that we were talking about earlier was that there's a rendition part of this act, and concerns U.S. citizens who could be rendered without any due process and put into some camp never to be heard from again. And it turns out that this information is accurate. Now, through the legalese and the different lawyers that have participated in putting this together, we find that this information is not just something that's simple to find, but it is there. One of the other provisions that are coming out right now, and we've been looking at this pretty closely, has to do with propaganda. Now, the specific part of it is called the Thornbury-Smith provision. Now, the Thornbury-Smith provision deals specifically with trying to actually fund propaganda for use in the United States. In other words, we're going to pay to be lied to by our own government. Now, I don't find that as being a very, suitable use of our funds, but then our leadership seems to think it's important for us, and it's something they want to do. They're protecting us, and we're paying the bill. The whole way along, if you disagree, then there must be something wrong with you because everybody knows government is loving and warm and caring. Now, one of the stories that kind of ties in with this has to do with the NSA, and we've got a whistleblower. William Binney was a crypto mathematician for the NSA and had access to a lot of the information that is up at the higher level so that we can understand what's going on within the NSA. He says that the United States and citizens in this country have more information collected on them than people even living in East Germany under the Stasi would have had.
NSA's charter, and it was a legitimate one, was to do foreign intelligence, and I was with that all the way, and I did the best I could in that job. Unfortunately, they took those programs that I built and turned them on you, and I'm sorry for that. I didn't intend that, but they did that.
And this information, according to him, goes back as far as 10 years, and they've collected every single bit of information, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's a text message, any information that went into the cyberspace has now been collected. Your own phone calls and everything else along with it. So who knows what you said over the past 10 years, but it could be used against you. We've got an international war, we've got rendition, we've got a national propaganda machine, we've got all these things going. The only thing we need to figure out is how to pay for it. Well, since we're going to pay for it, I guess that's important to us. Paying the bill might be expensive, but our national security is important. And, no matter what price you pay, it's really important for us to make sure that we're safe here at home, we're safe around the world. So the bills just keep coming, and we just keep getting safer and safer. The more they know about us and the less of the, money we have, obviously that's better for us. If a foreign power had attacked us, do you think they could take all our money and get rid of all our rights? Well, probably not, but our government can. Now, it's not anything to worry about because After all, we've got this new budget talks, and the terms that are going around, the fiscal cliff and all these different things, may seem like a little bit frightening, but there are some really nice sound bites out there. One of them is the path to prosperity. Now, doesn't that sound pleasant? That's been quoted around quite a bit. We also have the roadmap for America's future, another one of those little phrases that just sounds kind of pleasant. The whole thing about it is, well, it just costs you money. And the way it breaks down, as we go into this budget, the president has proposed $1.6 trillion over 10 years in increased taxes. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Well, don't worry. The other guys are proposing only $800 billion in increased taxes over 10 years. But it gets better because along with the tax increases come cuts in services. So not only are you paying more, but you're going to get less. Now, Obama's plan has to do with $350 billion being taken out of Medicare and Medicaid. A lot of that has to do with increasing the age for you to actually go on Medicare and Medicaid, so you'd have to be older to get on it. And once again, the GOP has come back with another plan talking about $600 billion in cuts to Medicaid and Medicare. So by the time you add up the differences, the increased taxes and the amount of deductions that, in your own personal, benefits that you're going to get, all we know at the end of the day is we're going to pay more and we're going to get less. That's what your leadership's doing. Now, some of the things that they're going to cut in this, the different cuts within our benefit program, have to do with workers' contributions to their retirement funds, and that's for federal workers. Now, we're also cutting farm subsidies, that's listed. An increase in the airline security fee, that's another thing listed. It can't be too safe in the air. We've already paid for the TSA to come in and keep us safe, but now we got to pay some more bills for something else, whatever we need. And we also have an overhaul of the Postal Service. Now, the Postal Service, that's an interesting one to overhaul. They've been talking about the Postal Service losing money and not being able to run and all these different things. But the interesting thing about this with anything else is by the time you paid for all the infrastructure for these systems, and I mean, over many years we've had this Postal Service, all the property that's been owned, all the buildings, all the different sorting materials that go through and actually sort out the mail and the packages, all the trucks for delivery, all the transportation that goes into it, not to mention all the funds for the workers and everything else. It's a huge infrastructure, but it's already paid for. So how do we pay all the bills to build this thing, and now we don't have enough money to run it? Well, the answer is government's running it, and that's the problem. Everything government runs costs too much and doesn't do the service. And so our budget continues to march down that same path. We're going to pay more for less. Now, there are other things that actually come up in this, and both sides, the GOP and the president, have the similar idea on them. They're going to reduce the cost of living that you'll get in regards to your Social Security check. And that's just by changing the formula to make, well, instead of 4%, you're going to get 3%. Instead of 5%, you're going to get 4%. However they figure it, it's actually going to be less of an increase. So as our economy continues to go down, as our currency becomes more worthless, as inflation gains on us, we're going to have less compensation from the government. You pay the bills, all the bills, and then you get less benefits. That's what it's all about. Now, they're also talking about increasing the debt ceiling. This is an interesting thing because at the same time they're talking about increasing the debt ceiling, they're talking about reducing our debt. It's kind of like an Orwellian thing, and it's kind of like up and down. We don't know which side is which, and we don't know which side of the mouth they're talking on. But one thing is for sure. If we're going to try and cut our deficit and reduce our spending, why do they need to raise the debt ceiling? That's something only Democrats and Republicans can answer. Now, we can talk about the particulars till we're blue in the face. We can go into this on both sides, and we can say, well, look, we're either going to fall down on the left, we're going to fall down on the right, but at the end of the day, we're all going to be in the dirt. And that's where we're going. They're eliminating services. They're charging us more for the services that we have, and we're going to continue to pay more taxes. We really don't have any choice at all. We've got two options, and they're both lousy. So I'm going to ask you something right now. How's your leadership doing? I'm Mark DeWitt for Black and White.